So let's get back to talking a little bit more about affordances. Now, affordances, like I said, is a very important concept. And again, affordances is an affordance is the action that you can take on an object, right? It is the total set of actions and what you do with an object. Now that we have this concept of affordances, we can start looking at what it is that brains do when they are reaching and grabbing for something. So, for example, we have some early research that shows that the parietal lobe, neurons in the parietal lobe, don't fire when a monkey is not doing anything. But whenever the monkey reaches to press a button to get food, these neurons would fire. Now, the really interesting thing is, if the monkey was just moving his arm to grab like a box or something, the neurons wouldn't necessarily fire. Instead, these neurons are very specifically fire when these monkeys are trying to achieve a goal, when they have some goal in mind and they're trying to get to it. That's when these neurons fire. If you think about it, when you look at what it is that we do when we're doing even very simple things, for example, if you want to take a sip of coffee, you have to find the cup, perceive it, reach for it at the correct speed and trajectory. Once you get to the cup, you have to grasp it in a certain way and then lift it to your mouth to drink the coffee. You don't really appreciate this functionality until you don't have it anymore. So for example, if you've ever dealt with people with brain damage, for example, somebody who suffered a stroke, you'll know that they have a really hard time. Some of them have a very hard time doing things like this. You can also simulate it by being very drunk. If you've ever been very drunk, you know that it's really hard to do fine motor skills and to get your body coordinated. This is a very complex set of actions that are related to goal-oriented behaviors and affordances. Now, in humans, we have evidence for this sort of system as well. There's evidence that we have in our parietal lobes an area very similar that functions very similarly to the way the parietal area functions in the monkey. It's been called the parietal reach region, PRR, as you can see here on this slide. There's evidence that, obviously, monkeys have it, and there's evidence that we have it as well. Fattori did experiments in monkeys looking at the different regions of the parietal lobe that are used in grasping, and the research that he did is summarized at the top of page 165 and at the bottom of page 165 in your textbook. And basically, what they did was they put a monkey in a room, lit up an object, and then turned the lights off, and then measured brain responses as the monkey reached for this object. And they were able to determine 3 different brain regions that were used for doing different types of grasp, whether it's a whole hand grasp or primitive precision grasp or finger grasp. These different, let me see if it's in your, oh, here it is right here. This is the figure that's on the top of your book, right? So the monkey would look at this object, would fixate on a dot, the light would come on, then the light would go off. So now the monkey knows where the object is relative to the dot that he's looking at, and then he would reach for the object. And they identified these different types of grips right here: whole hand, primitive precision, advanced precision, and finger prehension, right? Where you're opening a car door, for example. And each one of these different grips fires off different groups of neurons, as you can see right here on this slide here. For example, neuron A didn't really respond much to primitive precision or advanced precision, but boy, look at the way it fired with whole hand prehension. Similarly, neuron C is active with a lot of different ones, but it's mostly active with the advanced precision grip. So Schindler did a set of studies where basically what he had two types of people with parietal lobe damage and non-brain damaged people. And what he did was he would set up these two cylinders, like two little tubes, and then the people had to reach between the tubes and touch the gray area, right? Pretty simple task. Now, if I ask you to do it and you do not have parietal damage, right? What you would have your reach would look very similar to these red arrows. Notice how the arrows shift with the positions of the cylinders. In other words, you would be knowing where the cylinders are and judging the middle of those cylinders and correctly putting your hand through the middle and touching the gray strip. People with this type of parietal lobe damage, with this condition called ataxia, can't do this very well. What they do is they reach in, but they don't compensate for the locations of the cylinder, knowing that notice that they're just going straight ahead, right? So they've lost the ability to judge exact position as to how to get to a particular goal. And this is again is related to damage, we believe, to this parietal region. Mirror neurons. Mirror neurons were discovered about 20 years ago, and it was an accidental discovery. Basically what happens is that we have an entire array of neurons in our cortexes, monkeys as well as humans, that respond not only when the monkey or the human does something, but also when the monkey or human watches somebody else do something. So for example, if I were to ask you to grab this flashlight, you would reach for it and I could record activity from a certain set of neurons. If I then had you watch me grab the same flashlight, those same neurons would fire, and hence they had hence they got the name mirror neurons. So they mirror the response of actually grabbing. If instead you watch me grab the flashlight with like a tool, like a set of pliers or tongs, there's a greatly reduced response. So in other words, I'm not exactly mirroring the activity that you did or that you could do with your hand because you don't have the tongs, right? So the mirror response is greatly reduced. There are mirror neurons in throughout the cortex, and there's a lot of different theories as to what these mirror neurons are for. One of the possible functions is to help understand another animal's actions, right? So, in other words, the mirror neurons are there to mirror what's going on in the outside world and to encode the expectations of what's happening in the outside world so that you can have appropriate responses. And of course, mirror neurons can also help to imitate the actions that are being observed. There are also audiovisual mirror neurons that can predict or that mirror the actions that you see and the sounds that you hear. Probably what mirror neurons do is act to link sensory perceptions and motor actions. So essentially what they're doing is rendering inside of your brain a representation of reality and helping to bring together all of the different perceptions and things that you have to do, right? That's what these mirror neurons are for, is really to bring together all of your perceptions and all of your actions and to come up with appropriate behaviors given the context that you happen to be in. So for example, here's an example, right? So if a monkey, right, a monkey watches me place this food on a tray, its mirror neurons will fire. And then if the monkey grabs the food with his hand, its mirror neurons fire. right? So we have these mirror neurons are firing when I or the experimenter is putting food on, as well as when the monkey is reaching himself. However, if the experimenter uses a pair of pliers to do it instead of a hand, the mirror neurons don't fire because it's not mirroring a natural action. It's not mirroring what the hand is doing. Instead, it's instead of what it's observing is what a tool is doing. So there's this tool in the way. So the mirror neurons don't fire as much as they do when it's just the hand that's doing the activity. Let's see. So here's another set of data from mirror neurons, right? So this is firing of a neuron. So a firing of a neuron. So the higher the lines here, this is time, like maybe a second or so, and the higher the firing, or the higher these bars, the more the neuron is firing. At this point here in time, the monkey sees the experimenter break a peanut and hears the sound of the peanut breaking open. And his mirror neurons fire like crazy. When the monkey just sees the experimenter break a peanut but does not hear the sound, it still fires off the mirror neurons. When it hears the sound, it fires off the neurons. And interestingly, the most interesting point is when the monkey breaks the peanut itself and of course hears the sound, those exact same neurons are firing. So all of these neurons seem to work together. These mirror neurons seem to be working together to integrate our behaviors, our actions, our goals, and our perceptions. Mirror neurons can be influenced by context and different intents, right? So, for example, we have a human watching this film, right? So we have and we are so what the human is doing is watching two different kinds of films. And notice that one of the films is related to drinking tea and the other film is related to cleaning up. Now, you have to realize that there's a difference between drinking tea and cleaning up. When you're drinking tea, when you're picking up a cup, you're using it for yourself. So you have a very directed goal toward that cup and toward all the other things that are on the table. When you're just cleaning up, there is no goal-directed behavior like with drinking tea. It's instead it's related more to a general action, right? It's not like drinking where you have this specific target and these specific things you want to do. You're simply, when you're just cleaning up, you're simply trying to get everything off the table. And it turns out that these intents of drinking versus cleaning up, these different intents are represented differently in the brain in our mirror neurons, right? So, for example, if we look at the data and look at how the signals in our parietal lobes change, you'll notice that anytime the person is just watching action, just generic action, like for example, picking up a cup or moving a cup. So there's no clear intent. It's just, you're just basically watching somebody pick up a cup with different motions, right? Whenever you're watching somebody just doing some action, it's like, the activity in the different parts of your parietal lobe go up a little bit, but not too much. Similarly, when you're watching somebody do cleaning, the activity goes up a little bit more, a significant amount, right? You're watching somebody cleaning, so it goes up. the activity in these parietal areas goes up like crazy when you're actually watching somebody drinking tea. So whenever there's a goal directed behavior that you're watching, as opposed to just action or a more generic behavior like cleaning, this goal directed behavior causes an immense firing of the mirror neuron networks that are in the parietal lobe. So traditionally, when we've been studying perception, we tend to focus on how the individual stimuli are represented inside of the nervous system. So we go from, for example, we go from retina to the optic chiasm and to the thalamus and to the cortex, and we're sort of tracing the circuit, right, and trying to figure out what the how the stimulus is being represented. This is definitely not a very good, very useful approach. I mean, it has some uses, but really some of the more recent research has been focused more on action-based accounts of perception. In other words, it's all based on what you're doing and what you need to do. So action-based accounts of perception, the assumption of these action-based accounts of perception is that the purpose of our perception is to build representations in your mind of what you're looking at and what you need to do with it. All right, so it's a lot more utilitarian, a lot more pragmatic than simply tracing circuits in the brain.